Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm so glad that everybody is with us today. Um, my name is Kim Fryer, and I am our National Program Director at Wonders and Worries. And we are gathered together today to talk about how to have difficult conversations with your children. Um, Real quick, I'm going to see if I can set my Maria, you may want to, there you go. Yeah, since it's recording on my computer, I'm trying to figure out the video piece. Okay, so I'm Kim Fryer, and this topic is something that I'm, in a strange way, really excited to share the information with all of you. Of course, it's a difficult topic. We're going to be talking about having difficult conversations. There's a lot of different pieces of information I want to jump into, but I'm going to try not to go off on tangents because we do have a limited time, and I really see this as a beginning of a conversation. I'll be sharing as we go throughout other ways you can engage with Wonders and Worries. So some of you have already been connected in the past. Some of you might be learning about us for the first time. And either way, whether you're already connected or you're just learning about us, just know that we are here ongoing to be available to you and to really dive into those individual questions that you may have as we go through this. I also want to let everybody know that we are recording this, and we will share the link to the presentation so you can access it later. And I will share the PowerPoint slides. So feel free to take notes, but you don't have to take notes. You will get access to all of the slides. So just a little bit about Wonders and Worries in case you're new to Wonders and Worries. And I know we have many parents on who are joining us, but we also have many professionals. So I'm going to be directing all of this to parents, but I love that professionals have joined us as well. So Wonders and Worries, if you're not familiar, we are a nonprofit organization. We offer free professional support for children and teens when a parent or a direct caregiver has a life-altering illness or injury. We're based out of Central Texas, but we have resources and support now available nationwide. So just a little bit about kind of our values, because I really think this sets the tone as we start to talk about having difficult conversations. So Wonders and Worries values empowering parents and families. As you all navigate illness, we want to empower you and just come alongside and support you. We understand that children and teens absolutely can reach their full potential despite a parent's serious illness. We promote including children early and often and in age-appropriate ways, and we're going to talk about that. So when a family is facing a serious illness challenge or other challenge, including children and teens often. And then with that continued support, children feel connected throughout the medical situation, and it promotes their healthy short-term and long-term coping. The way that we go about supporting children, we come alongside you to do these things that you see on this slide that I'm going to mention. And then there are times when we work directly with children and teens, and one of our staff members will go through this process of giving children an age-appropriate understanding of the illness, the treatment, and the side effects, facilitating the communication of feelings so that children and teens can express their emotions, and then identifying those individual coping skills to help with easing any of those emotions, the stress, the sadness, the anger, and the fear. And then just a note about child life specialists, because many of you may not be familiar with the child life profession. I'm a child life specialist and have been for over 30 years. I've been with Wonders and Worries over 20 years, which is such a privilege. So child life specialists are unique in that we're similar, but not exactly like a counselor or a therapist. We have a background in child development, but specifically focus on helping children and teens, really all ages, understand, process, and cope with medical situations. You will often find child life specialists in children's hospitals, working with children and teenagers who themselves have illnesses or injuries. And then, of course, at Wonders and Worries, we're in a community setting, and we're focusing on children and teens who have a parent or caregiver with a serious illness or injury. Okay, so let's jump in. How to have difficult conversations with your children. I want to start with just thinking about why it's important. To me, as a parent, I'm a parent myself, but even, when I'm working with other children, it really helps me to remind myself, why is it important that we talk about these difficult things? So first, children are impacted by what is happening around them, whether we are talking about it or not. Sometimes as adults, we have this idea that we can protect a child from a situation if we don't talk about the situation. But if the situation is happening in their world, they are impacted by it. They may not understand what's happening, but they tune in and they may pick up on very small things like, my mom's been going outside to talk on the telephone, or I see those worry lines on her forehead, or my dad's been working a lot more or working a lot less, just small things. And so they're experiencing what's happening. They're just not able to make sense of it. So what I encourage parents to do is to take that instinct to protect, which is a very important and natural instinct that we have, but to shift it to protecting your relationship with your children. And when you focus on it that way, you will want to protect that trust that you've built. You'll want to protect that connection that you have. So then the next reason that I want to focus on it in terms of why these conversations are important, without you to help them understand and cope with difficult circumstances or difficult life events, children are left alone to navigate a challenging world. And we know that we live in a challenging world. And of course, we don't want to bombard children. But when something challenging comes into either their life or the lives of those around them, it's important that we help them navigate that. And I love this statement by Dr. Becky Kennedy. I don't know, many of you probably are familiar with Dr. Becky Kennedy and her Good Inside podcast and website. But to me, this says it all. You can't change the hard, but you can change the alone. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And then the last piece along these lines is that children can handle hard things. With support and tools, they can handle it. I see it every day, and I've seen it for 30 plus years, and with my own children who are now 22 and 21 years old. And they want to be included. It's a human instinct. It's a human need to be connected, to be part of a family. And so when something's happening around a child and we exclude them with good intention to protect them, just their neurological response can be very strong in terms of something's wrong. I'm feeling disconnected, but they don't really understand why. So they want to be included. Without interaction from us and information from us, they can feel alone and they can feel helpless. And including them gives us opportunity to, in age-appropriate ways, again, let them help. And that can be a very empowering thing. So take just a minute, and after this presentation, I'd encourage you to take some more time to really think about your goals for your children, and then think about how having difficult conversations promote those goals. So like one idea is, like, for me, a goal for my children is to come to me as a trusted person if they're struggling with anything. However, if I'm not coming to them with these difficult conversations, one, I'm not role modeling to them how to do that. How do they talk about difficult things, either with me or with anyone in their world, any other relationships that they're in? And how do they know that I can handle that I'm okay with talking about difficult things? And then just longer term, a goal that I certainly have for my children is to feel capable to have the tools to navigate a challenging world. And by having these conversations, we're helping them build those tools. Okay, so this is an analogy that I have found really helpful, the suitcase analogy. To think about the idea with difficult conversations is not to overload a child, not to share information that they don't need, or that's, all of the things that are in our minds as an adult. They don't need all of that, but they need pieces that fit for them. And so thinking about that in terms of providing information based on your child's ability to understand. And you won't always know. This is definitely, it can be a little bit of a trial and error, but I like to think about it as their ability to begin to understand. It's going to be a process. So from the very beginning, they're not going to know how to cope with a parent's serious illness, but they can begin to start to understand when you're presenting that information in a way that fits for them. Focus on what pertains to them. So they don't need to know all the things that might be in your mind. Your suitcase will always be heavier. You're going to be carrying more. But you, as you think about it, you'll be able to, I think, tune in to, okay, this piece is important for them to know. And then talking with your child promotes those feelings of belonging, like I was mentioning, and that connection to you and your family, and empowering them builds confidence. So even like with this picture here, this is just a stock photo, but I noticed this little guy with his backpack, and he looks proud to me. He looks like, I've got this. I can carry these things. And that's a really important piece to just help our children start to feel capable and to be able to advocate for themselves. And we're not asking them to put things in their suitcase that belong to other people. We're not saying, you know, pack all these other things up, but just take what you need. So hopefully that provides a framework. And then I want to set the tone for kind of where we're going to go from here. I'm going to talk about how to prepare for difficult conversations. I'm going to talk about how to start difficult conversations, and then how to have those ongoing conversations. Because it really is, it's not a conversation, it's the beginning of a process. And then I'm going to share a couple of ideas for activities that you can do at home. So preparing. And I'm just going to take a deep breath, because I find that I kind of think about this presentation as the way I'm describing to you. Like there's so much I want to share, but I really do want to focus in on what I hope might be a really good starting point. And I always encourage all of us to have self-awareness before you jump into a conversation with your child or with your children. Be aware of your own emotions. Think about your emotional triggers, your hot spots. If your child reacts with anger and frustration, maybe that's something you know will trigger frustration in you and might require some deep breaths, maybe a break from the conversation. Make a plan for managing your emotions. I will often let my children know if there's something emotional that we're going to talk about, that I'm likely going to cry because I'm a crier. And so they know mom's probably going to cry. And I just tell them that's how I express myself, and it's okay. The key is that we don't get to a point as a parent where we are overwhelmed emotionally and we're putting our children in a role of having to care for our emotional needs. And when we tune in, we can kind of tell when that happens, if we kind of flip. And so if we feel like we're about to be emotionally overloaded, that's when we need to take a break. We can get a glass of water, we can take a bathroom break, and then we definitely need to think about, like, who can I talk to? Who are those adults in my world who can support me, and what are my coping tools? Okay, so setting up the environment, I'm going to talk about the who, what, where, when, and why, but we've just talked about the why. And in the next kind of section, we're going to talk a little bit more about the what. So right now, let's focus on the who and the when and the where. So with families who have more than one child, if you're thinking about, you know, we need to talk about this new diagnosis, this serious illness, we need to talk about a divorce, we need to talk about an accident that happened to a loved one or a friend, or a natural disaster that occurred that impacts our family. Should I do that with my children together? Should I do it one-on-one? How should I structure that? And there's no right way. Trust your instincts. You're going to hear me say that a lot. What feels right to you? And then what I do encourage is to do both at some point. It usually is helpful with multiple children in a family to have some one-on-one time, because all children are different, even if they're the same age. Some children want a lot of information. Some children are like, just tell me what I need to know. And then, of course, if you have children at different ages, different developmental levels, different needs, you'll want to have some one-on-one to really focus in on that individual child. But it's also important to come together as a family and to talk as a family, and to send that message that we can talk openly when we're all together. It doesn't need to be a situation where you only can come to me when we have one-on-one time. So you're setting the tone in both kind of realms. And then additional support people, just thinking about the adults that, you know, should be there. And then I do encourage to have somebody that's maybe a little more disconnected available. So if you're together as a family and one of your children wants to take a break, you know, Aunt Susie's in the kitchen and you can go in the kitchen and grab a snack. having someone in that role, depending on, again, your instincts. Time of day, avoid big transition times. So avoiding bedtime and avoiding like school drop off or a time when you're about to separate. Sometimes there's no way to avoid this. I was just on the phone 2 days ago with a dad who called our helpline. We're going to talk about our helpline later, but he had 30 minutes. He was picking his daughter up from school. His wife was in the hospital on a ventilator, kind of in an unknown situation. He needed to tell his daughter, he wanted to tell his daughter what was happening with her mom. He had 30 minutes and then he needed to take his daughter to a close friend's home. And so we just talked through, this is the time you have, this is how you can do this, how you can give her the information that she needs right now, and then help with that transition to her friend's home. But if you have the ability to structure it, then if you can, avoid bumping up to big transition times. And we're going to talk about unexpected conversations later. Children will often bring stuff up at bedtime, and we're going to talk about that. But if they do that, they're also saying, I'm wanting to talk about this right now. It's kind of led by them versus led by you. And then the setting, inside your home or outside your home, either is okay. The key is to try to find a comfortable, private, flexible space where you're not going to be maybe inadvertently interrupted. So a restaurant or maybe like a park might not be ideal because people can't really express their emotions, and they can't be, you don't have that flexibility or that privacy. Okay, so a few more things about the environment and just kind of what to think about in preparation. Have items available like fidget type items or Play-Doh or markers and paper, things that your children and teens can do with their hands. I do recommend leaving electronics out of the interaction. Just everybody, including yourself, let's put all of our electronics in this bowl or in the other room. Just having them there can create some mental and emotional distraction. But having something to do with their hands can be really helpful for children and teens. And then comfort items, blankets, stuffed animals, pets can be wonderful comfort items. And then limiting eye contact. So this is something that parents don't necessarily think about or maybe are not aware of. But when we have eye contact with our children, it can be a wonderful thing. It's really important, but it can also create some emotional overload, especially when we're talking about a difficult topic. And children will naturally, I'm sure you've seen this often, where they'll avert their gaze. Teens will avert their gaze. They'll want to look elsewhere. And their brain and kind of their nervous system is just saying, that's too much for me. I'm trying to process, but it's too much to have this eye contact with my mom or my dad. So allow them to avert their gaze. You don't have to encourage it, but just allow them to do what they naturally need and want to do. You might have like a tummy to back kind of a thing. They might want to cover up with a blanket, and just allow that. And then you can meet their gaze and just let them know you're there for them. So just being aware. And if you're interested, you can read about research on eye contact. It's pretty interesting and beneficial, I think. And then flexibility. There's no perfect scenario. So just try to have a flexible mindset. You might have this idea of, we're going to have this conversation and this is how it's going to go, but kind of go with the flow as best as you can and just share what you can. And again, this is a beginning of many conversations. So realistic expectations. We aren't going to be able to go through developmental considerations in our Wonder Chat today, but we have amazing resources. We have a number of tip sheets, and we have an amazing app that does have a lot of great developmental information. What I want to mention right now is that the younger your child, the less they're going to focus on the future, the more they're going to be in the here and now. What do they need to know for today and tomorrow? You know your children best in terms of temperament, coping style. Do you have a neurodiverse child who, maybe needs some additional kinds of considerations? Just know that your child's reaction to difficult information is going to really fall in line with how they react to other things. It may be more intense, but it's going to be very similar. If you have kind of a flexible, go with the flow child, they're still going to have a reaction, but it's probably going to be a little more flexible and go with the flow than your child who tends to be a little more anxious or focused on details. What listening looks like, kind of going back to that eye contact. Children may need to move around. They may need to be doing something with their hands. It doesn't mean they're not listening. You may not get any reaction from them. They may not ask any questions, especially if what you're sharing is brand new, like they don't even have a framework for it. So it's really hard to ask questions about something that they've never even really heard about before. Joking and laughter are common reactions to emotional discomfort. So be prepared for that, especially with tweens and teens and maybe those school agers. They may say something that feels kind of like, oh, but just know that it's coming from a place of emotional discomfort. And you can certainly set limits, but maybe just be gentle about that. Children will struggle. We're talking about difficult things. It's a difficult circumstance. And so just know that that's normal. It would be abnormal for a child not to struggle, just as if your medical team said, you know, you've gotten this diagnosis, you're not going to struggle at all. This is going to be no problem. That's just not realistic. But what you can focus on is how you can help them, you know, cope with their struggles, and to be aware that the struggle will be different for each person. And so starting to tune into what is it that's most difficult for each of your children with what's happening, you know, in the situation at any given time, and then trust your instincts. There's a worksheet that I'll share later. This is just kind of exactly what I went through, the who, what, when, where, and why. So I'll be sending this out with the PowerPoint, and it's just a way to kind of prepare when you have that ability to prepare. Okay, so starting the difficult conversation. Let's dive in, and let me give you some specifics. What can be really helpful is to think about this as a story. And it's also really helpful. We're going to talk a little bit about books, but there may be a book that you can add to the conversation where you talk a little bit and then read a story together. We have a wonderful list of book recommendations on our website, but I highly recommend that. But just in terms of explaining what you're wanting and needing to explain, kind of catch your child or teen up with what has happened, kind of to that point, like what brings you to this point, and then what's happening now, and what are you expecting will happen next. Be honest, use accurate terms, appropriate for your child's developmental level. But if it's an illness, if it's cancer, if it's Lou Gehrig's disease, multiple sclerosis, it's even hard to say that, but use those words. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it helps children differentiate what's happening with that illness from other things that they may be familiar with, you know, the cold, the flu, COVID. And so otherwise they're just going to kind of lump it all together. And if another child that they know or another person in the family, you know, has the flu, then your child might think, oh, this is all the same kinds of things are going to happen. So really helping them start to differentiate. This is what we're dealing with. This is what it's called. And it's going to take time and be a process. Certainly maintains that trusting relationship. And then where I have here, it decreases parent stress. Many parents will tell me after they have this first conversation, if it's something that their children aren't aware of yet, like a new diagnosis, they'll say it's a relief to have used the word cancer, to have started talking about this as a family, because I was always worried that they would overhear and that they would find out in a way that wasn't, you know, me being able to talk with them. Find out what your child knows about the illness or, you know, the situation, and then discuss the changes, those things that will most impact your child. And then whenever possible, do maintain routines, because that does really help with normalcy and helps with coping. So some conversation starters. There's something important I want to talk with you about. I was wondering what you know about. It could be, I was wondering if you've noticed anything different, something happened today or last week or last month that I want to be sure you understand. So there's just a few ideas to kind of get the conversation going. So I'm going to give you some ideas for just talking about cancer. Of course, that's our you know, that's our perspective at Wonders and Worries, is not just cancer, any illness, any injury, but this kind of style can maybe help if there are other difficult conversations you're needing to have with your children. But just explaining as best you can, and focusing on the body. Our bodies are made up of cells. Cells are building blocks in the body. Healthy cells have a job in the body. Cancer cells do not have a job in the body, and they can get in the way of the healthy cells doing their job. They grow and they spread if they're not treated. If we don't do something about them, they don't typically go away on their own. So that's just one example. Clarifying misconceptions. So there's a variety of misconceptions that children can have, and just thinking about the cancer example, can they catch it? Did they cause it? But one other very common question that children have, and it could be a misconception, but is that if it's cancer, then that means the person will die. And I recommend, and all of us at Wonders and Worries recommend, that you address this up front. Most children wonder about death, especially when they hear something new that they maybe don't fully understand, a new illness, a new situation. And so just bringing that up directly. So one way that might come up is, you may have heard that sometimes people die from cancer, but most people who have cancer live. I'm doing everything I can to help my body get better, and this is what my medical team expects will happen next. Using the word expect or the word believe, I believe, if it's true, like you could say, I believe I will get better from this cancer, or I believe I will be able to manage this medical situation, or I expect, or my medical team expects. And if that's not the case, then we are going to talk a little bit about how we talk about end of life and preparing a child for the end of life of a loved one. Okay, so a few analogies that can be helpful, and this is specific to cancer, and then I have some analogies for illnesses other than cancer. Weeds can be a great analogy. It can be something concrete that a child can see or a teen can see, and they can really think about and understand. If we don't do something about them, they can kind of take over. They can take over a vegetable garden or a flower garden and crowd out the healthy plants and flowers. Weeds can also be a good analogy in a situation where maybe it's a stage 4 cancer that can't be cured, so to speak, but it's a chronic situation where they can understand we can have some weeds and we can still have healthy plants and flowers if we're able to maintain or kind of manage those weeds and keep them contained. And then a team activity, this is something that might be helpful with like those middle schoolers or high schoolers, just thinking about any team. It could be a marching band, it could be theater, it could be any sports group, but those teammates each have a job, and that the teammates represent the healthy cells. They have a job or a position on the field. Let's say they're out on the football field. But if we put, I'm in Texas, or well, right now I'm actually in Colorado, but I'm from Texas. So if we put 100 armadillos on the football field, how easy will it be for those teammates to do their job? Those armadillos might not be trying to cause a problem, but they're likely to cause a problem. So you can also have some fun with just, coming up with analogies, being able to talk about what's happening in ways that your child or teen can relate to. And then the pictures here, I just want to mention kind of a shout out to Jacqueline Rybacek on our team, and Anna Boxall, I think is how she pronounces her name, was our illustrator. This is a newly released book, the first one in our I Wonder series. And we've been looking for gaps in the literature. And one of the gaps that we were aware of is books for children who have a dad with cancer. And so this is a book about a dad with cancer, and it does have some teaching components. And there are many other wonderful books to help talk with children about cancer and other illnesses. And for other analogies for explaining other illnesses, using a cell signal or the internet as an example, when we have a bad connection, how that creates challenges. Of course, we can all relate to that, and our tweens and teens can certainly relate to that. And then road construction, you can kind of talk about a road map and then relate that to the body. Where is the damage in the person's body, and how is that causing slowdown in movements or interference with messages going from the brain to the nervous system or to the muscles. Using Legos can be really helpful to kind of build and restructure. The marble maze can be a great way to show, the marble can travel when the openings are there, but if we kind of turn that around and there's a blockage, the marble can't continue to travel. So some open-ended questions. I always encourage this to be a conversation with your children. And I may have said this inadvertently, and I hope I didn't, but I encourage parents to not think about this as talking to your children, but talking with your children. And so providing some information, then pausing, checking in. You can ask some open-ended questions. What is something that you already know about that? Or what is something I said that was confusing or strange or surprising? Maybe avoiding some of those more loaded words, such as, what's something that scares you? Because your child may not even be at a point where they're like, oh, I am feeling scared. So you could just say, what are you curious about? Or using, like I said, that word confusing can be more neutral. Tell me about another time when you've heard someone talk about this topic, or what would you want someone else to understand about this, especially as you're getting into later conversations. Name some things you're wondering about. And then avoiding why questions. Why questions are hard to ask without some level of judgment being felt, even if it's not intended. Why do you think that? That I might be curious, but it can kind of feel like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to think that. Why did you do that? That's often kind of like, oh, I just did something wrong. And so try in this situation or when you're having difficult conversations to avoid why questions. And then ending the conversation. Tuning in to your child, cues that they are done. We often know this as parents, either they leave the room, they just cover up, their body language will tell us a lot, they interrupt. I've had children just come to me and close my mouth, basically, stop talking, Kim. So we usually know, but tune into that and end the conversation. Even if you're not done, even if there's more, take a break. If it's really time sensitive and there's things you have to let your child know, you can still take a quick break. Pause if you can, get a snack, get a drink before you or your child become frustrated. Avoid that temptation to fix it. We want to kind of wrap it in a bow when we're ending a conversation, but this is a difficult situation. And so, saying everything's going to be okay, your child certainly may not feel that. And you want to leave open space for, I'm not okay with this. This is tough. This is hard. This stinks. But you can focus on strengths. Your belief in them, your belief in your family's ability, your belief in, each other. You can communicate that. I believe we're going to be able to handle this. I know that you can handle difficult things. I'm here for you. And then offering choices for what to do next. Just suggesting ideas. Would you like to go outside and play? Would you like to go relax? Excuse me. Giving them options for things that they can do next. I'm noticing something in the chat. Maria, feel free to chime in if there's something that we should pause for. So the next continuing, yes. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, there was how to discuss when your diagnosis is terminal and things start to go down, especially if things have been good for a while.
Okay, great. Wonderful question. We will get to that. So I'll let's bookmark that and we'll come back to it. It's kind of at the end of this section. So continuing the conversation. Why are ongoing conversations needed? I think this probably makes sense as we're talking, but children need repetition and they need time to process information, even teenagers. They've just heard something. It's very common. I hear many parents say to me, Kim, I told my child, I don't think they understood. I don't think they heard me. They haven't asked anything. They haven't brought it up. They're processing. And they'll often say things. I was talking with a dad the other day who said, my daughter knows that her mom's really sick and can't leave the hospital, but she's going to the beach with her cousins. And she said, oh, is mom going to be there? This is a young little girl whose only framework at the beach was mom is always at the beach. And so she's still trying to figure out and getting it, kind of wrong, so to speak, sometimes in terms of, well, right now, that's not possible. So they need repetition. They need time to process. We can't cover it all. It's better in smaller chunks if that's a possibility. And then our children are continually changing. Their brains are changing. The things they're thinking about are changing. Of course, their life experiences are changing. And then the situation, if it's ongoing, if it's intense, or if it has direct impact on your child, we want to be continuing to talk about it. It's what I certainly recommend. So it's not one and done. So think about, when you have that first conversation, what worked well, what didn't work well. If it didn't go at all like you had hoped, you can always go back. You can say, that didn't go at all like I had hoped. I really wish I would have said this instead, or I really wish I would have done this instead. You can go back and what a wonderful thing to role model. Like, wow, that didn't go like I thought. Let's try again. Tune into your child's temperament. Again, kind of thinking about their development, their unique needs, their coping style. In terms of frequency, it depends. It depends on the situation, but I encourage you to think about a rhythm. You might already have a family rhythm. Maybe on Sundays, you kind of talk about the week. So just add in, if it's an illness situation, just make it so it's not a big conversation every time. It's just, okay, this is what's happening with, your camps this week. I'm going to pick you up and drop you off. Dad has his treatment on Sunday or Saturday or whatever. He'll probably be pretty tired the next day. You're just weaving it in to whatever your normal family rhythm is. If you don't have a family rhythm with around just, you're in a new phase. And I know for many of you, summer's just started. So it's a new time to kind of reset. Just start small and get input from your family. Hey, how would we like to communicate about this? And again, weave it into other things that you're communicating about. Or it may be obvious times, like this picture is when mommy's medicine would arrive. I'm not sure if it was weekly or every other week or monthly, but this box would arrive that had to be refrigerated. And so this family, that's a perfect time. Let's just check in. Hey, what do you remember about what mommy's medicine does? What's the purpose of mommy's medicine? And then let's have some fun with it. Let's decorate this box. Let's give ourselves some, positive affirmations. We can do this. So that's just a great example of how to revisit conversations along the way. Some of the things to do in follow-up conversations. What has happened since you last talked? What is happening now? What is the next step? Our name, Wonders and Worries, we use it all the time in sessions that we have with children. What is something you're wondering about since I saw you last? What is something you're worrying about? You can definitely use that as a parent as you're checking in. I had a child, and I think this is a really good example of the why it's important that we revisit. I had a child whose family had been very openly talking about, it was a terminal situation. His dad was on hospice and they'd been talking about it. But when I checked in with them, I said, what's something you're wondering about? He said, I wonder why they're bringing bombs into our house. Well, oxygen tanks had started to come into their home and just nobody had thought that he wouldn't understand what that was. Of course, everybody's so overwhelmed and busy, but try to look at the experience in just with fresh eyes. What's new, what's changed, what is something that my child may not understand? And then just having that environment for open communication. And we're going to talk about an activity that might help with that as well. And then normalizing typical emotions, also normalizing that it's very normal to feel happy and to have fun, even in the midst of dealing with something that's hard and sad and tough, that we can have both feelings at the same time. And then giving children choices. It's for involvement. They can give input. There may be things you just need them to do, but anytime you can give them an option about, these are some chores that we need to figure out how to get them done. Out of these 3 chores, is there one that you would like to do? Okay, so to the question that you were asking, things may be stable and then something changes. And so the way I kind of think about that is kind of starting a new conversation, and even going back to what we were just talking about, maybe in your mind thinking about, we're kind of venturing into a new topic. It's an extension of a prior topic, but we're at a new place. And so in a situation where maybe the treatment is no longer working, the illness is progressing, to state that. like we were going in this direction, or, even checking in, like, what do you understand? Asking your child, what do you understand about what has been happening? And then explaining, this is what's happening now. We're learning through the medical team, through these tests, through what the doctors are discovering, through what's happening with dad's body, that these things have changed. And if it's a situation where it's not expected to get better, what I will often say is, much of the time, if there's an illness or injury, there's something that we can do to manage that or to make it better. But sometimes there are illnesses, or it might be an injury, that can't be fixed. And right now, the doctors, the medical team, they don't think that there's any way to make this better. And over time, things will change with your dad's body. We don't know exactly when it will happen, but we're going to talk on a regular basis about what's happening today and what is expected to happen next. But at some point, your dad's body will stop working. That means his heart will stop beating, he will stop breathing, and he will die. That's not what we're expecting to happen today, but it may happen at some point soon, just depending on what you believe your time frame is, or some point in the future. So that's a little bit of language around that. We will probably at some point have a Wonder Chat fully focused more on conversations about end of life. We do have a tip sheet that focuses on that, and there is information in our app. And then I encourage any of you to call our helpline, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, to get some more individualized support around your situation and your circumstances. Helping children understand what death means is really important, and talking about it in terms of what happens with the body, and then focusing on them and that they will be taken care of, and the changes that specifically impact them, and asking them, kind of what are they wondering most about. Sometimes it'll be something that we think is really simple, like you could have a conversation like this, a really heavy conversation, and then your child could say, do I still get to go to Johnny's birthday party on Saturday? That may be, they're going to bring it back to the current moment. And it's a wonderful way that children can cope, because their brains stay more in the moment, certainly than adult or teenage brains, even when we're continually thinking about all the different hypothetical situations and all of the different future scenarios. So I hope that helped. I'm going to continue on, but we'll have some more time for Q&A at the end. So unexpected conversations, I mentioned this earlier. These happen all the time, right? Children ask questions and we're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that question. You can take time. I want to give you permission. Take a deep breath and say, that's a really important question. I really want to take some time to think about that. You want to honor the question and not be like, oh my gosh, don't talk about that, or we can't talk about that, but instead shift it to, that is really important. I really want to talk about this, but I want to take some time to think about it, or I want to do this at a time where I'm not as distracted. So write the question down, think about a time when you can revisit it. But check in around what your child is asking exactly. The example I can give, when my son was 8 years old, I had sent him to start completing a form for a camp that he was going to, and I was busy doing something else. And then I kind of forgot that I had asked him to do that. So he comes into the kitchen where I was and he said, Mom, what's sex? And thankfully, I had that kind of child life brain. And I said, I'm just curious what made you think about that. And he said, that form that I'm filling out, it says sex MF. And so I was like, okay, well, that's a very different question than where my brain had gone. And I can respond to that question. And he wasn't asking what I thought he might be asking. So just clarify when your child asks you something, tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking, or, I wonder, what made you think about that? And then going back to that suitcase analogy, your child may ask a question and you may feel like, I'm not prepared to share that information. It could be something that's really private about you. It could be something where you feel like that's kind of more something that the adults are handling. And you can say, that's a really good question. That's something that me and the other adults in your life are figuring out right now. And I'll definitely tell you more about that, as we go along, or I'll make sure you know what's most important for you to know. try to find some aspect that you can focus on, but absolutely set limits. And I can think about a mom who had some really challenging things happen in her childhood, and her children knew that some challenging things had happened in her childhood, and they would ask sometimes for more detail. And she would just say, I'm not ready to share more detail, but at some point I might. And so you can absolutely guide how much information either you're ready to share or you believe your child is prepared to begin to handle. So supportive activities. Here's a few quick, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I think you'll get the gist. So we love this activity that we call it the Wonders and Worries jar. It could be a bowl, it could be a box, it could be a notebook, but just a place to hold questions or to hold worries in between conversations. So have strips of paper or just some process that you create. And then when somebody's wondering something, they write it down, put it in the jar, and you can gather together to say, okay, let's focus on those things that are in the jar. With worries, it can be the idea of, instead of carrying this worry around in my mind all the time, I'm going to write it down or symbolize it in some way and put it in this jar to kind of hold it there. Of course, it's going to come back, but it's a way to maybe feel like I'm not carrying it all the time. You can actually talk about like having a worried thought and then adding a brave thought to that, or kind of what's a strength that can help me with the worried thought. Another activity is, this is called balloon worries. You could use balloons. This activity does involve popping balloons. So if your child would not like that, certainly children with like sensory issues might be like, I don't want to pop balloons. You could use toilet paper, and each square, rip off squares of toilet paper that could represent the balloon. So have each family member share a worry or a feeling that they're having and write it on the balloon or write it on the toilet paper square, and then talk about something that might help them when they feel that emotion. And then as a family, identify what you can do to help each other, to help that person when they're feeling that emotion or experiencing that worry, and then pop the balloon or rip up or flush the toilet paper square. And then the last one is a strength garden. And so we were talking about focusing on strengths. This can be a wonderful way to do that. You could also use like rocks and do like a strength rock garden, but you can create different flowers and represent each family member and really focus on all of those unique characteristics that each family member brings to the family, their unique strengths, their personality. And then decorate the pot to represent your whole family, your family values, your family strengths, your family support system, and then place this somewhere in your home where it can be a reminder and maybe a place where you gather together for additional conversations. Okay, I want to say a few words about resources, and then we're going to have some Q&A, and then I have a video of a family that I want to end on, because I think just hearing kind of in the words of another Wonders and Worries family can be helpful. So resources, I've been mentioning these throughout, but I encourage you to check out our website and to start with the illness discussion resources section. There's an explaining a cancer diagnosis tip sheet, several videos that are there. The one that I'm hopefully will show, I'll show it at the end, but if you have to hop off and you miss it, it's the last one here on this list, Telling My Child Ongoing Conversations. You can watch it later from our website. We also have the tip sheet on preparing for the death of a loved one and talking to children when treatment isn't working. And then we have our helpline. And so our helpline is available to anyone throughout the nation. I know we have a number of professionals who are either listening now or will listen in later. Professionals are also welcome to call our helpline, but it's meant to be in the moment guidance for time-sensitive situations or for families who aren't connected with a Wonders and Worries Child Life Specialist or one of our registered providers. We're currently answering the helpline Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time, but you can leave a voicemail at other times, and you can also email. And then we have an app, and I mentioned this app several times. I really recommend that you download it. It is packed with information. And so the QR codes are here for Google Play and for the App Store. This one is for parents. I'm going to show you on the next slide the one for professionals. But again, this will be, you can take a picture real quick if you want of this slide, but this will also come to you via email. And this is the app for professionals. So very similar information, but just geared a little bit differently, whether you're thinking about it from a professional lens or a parent lens. And then the last resource I just want to highlight is our podcast. It's our Wondercast, and it's really fun and amazing. And Julie May, our amazing staff member, facilitates, and we have different guests and really just focus on a lot of different topics that relate to parents, and specifically parenting when you're dealing with a serious illness in your home. Okay, so let's pause here for any other questions. I do want to mention, and Maria, if you're able to put this link in the chat, the link is just a feedback link. It will also come to each of you following this Zoom webinar. You'll get it in the Zoom thing and we'll email it out. But I really would love your feedback, because these Wonder Chats for parents are brand new. This is the very first one. We're going to record them and kind of create a library. But I'd love feedback on the length of time, the level of detail, other topics that you might be interested in, just anything, any feedback that you have. So take a few minutes when you can and share your feedback. Maria, are there any questions that you've received?
We don't have any yet.
Okay, well, then that's actually really great in the sense that I do want to share this video. So let's do that, and then we'll see if other questions come up. So this is a family of ours, a Wonders and Worries family, and they're just, it's about a 3.5-minute video, and the parents are talking about how they managed ongoing conversations with their daughter. And I believe she was about 8 years old when this video was filmed.
Our discussions with Ania, initially, she's very curious, and she doesn't like to not know what's going on, or else she kind of gets really anxious. And so I knew that this wasn't something that I could just not talk to her about, that I really had to figure out some way to that's age appropriate, that's not scary for her, to kind of tell her what's going on. Immediately, I kind of reached out to her teachers to kind of let them know what was going on, and they forwarded that to the counselor, and the counselor told me about Wonders and Worries in order to kind of help me figure out how to tell her in a way that's helpful for her, that doesn't make her immediately scared that something's going to happen to him tomorrow, that anything she was feeling, that she could just come to either me or Jose. One of our first conversations, when Jose came back from the hospital, she did ask me whether her daddy was going to die. And I wasn't expecting that question that soon, but thankfully I had already gone through the Wonders and Worries information. And so I felt, equipped to actually answer that question. But I did tell her that, this is what's going on with him now. He's had the surgery. They're going to do chemotherapy. We've had discussions before about death, and that happens to everyone. But right now, that's not something that the doctors have told us that's what's happening here. So then that kind of eased her. And I said, so we need to focus on, what's ahead for daddy. That's chemo. Let's talk about what that's going to look like for him. Except for that first initial time right after Jose came back from the hospital. She really hasn't asked me that question, so.
It comes up probably not as much as it did at the beginning. I think she just needs some reassurance initially that, daddy's not going to die tomorrow. She's like, well, if you don't do this, could you die? If this happens, could you die? And I was like, well, yeah, it's possible I could die. And she understands that someday I'm going to die, just whether it's from cancer or just having to be 90 years old and it's that time.
We really tried to tell her what she can expect to see. Maybe expect that his hair is going to fall out, or maybe expect he's going to be tired, so that she isn't scared like every moment, like, oh my gosh, that's different, that's something wrong. Maybe, his health is worse than what they're telling me.
Yeah. And then kind of out of that grew, she had lots of questions. So we just set aside time, usually, once a week, where we would talk about, she could ask whatever questions she wanted or whatever had been bugging her.
And we called it Cancer Fact Friday. So, because we kind of set up, Fridays might be a good time to do that.
Some of the first things we did was like looking up YouTube videos on cancer. We started with that, this is cancer, and lots of videos on how cancer cells spread and how they develop. And so then I think it lessened her anxiety overall.
The best advice I would give to other parents is to Be honest with your child about what's going on, because imagine what that child is going through. I mean, they don't understand the large word medical terms. They don't know what's going on. Hospitals are intimidating if they've been there. So for you as a parent to come to them, with safety and love, and to kind of tell them what's going on, that's like the best you can do for that child, I believe. And to share, because they have to share in this experience with us, because we're a family.
Okay, so I just appreciate so much when our families are, oh, sorry, hang on, there we go. I just appreciate so much when our Wonders and Worries families, all of you are able to share kind of your thoughts and your experiences with your children. And I get so much, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I get so much, I get wonderful ideas. Like I love, they had Cancer Fact Friday, like what a great idea. And so I just encourage families to come up with their own thing or borrow from somebody else. One other thing that I was just thinking about that I didn't mention before that can, again, make it unique to your family as you go through whatever type of experience you might be going through, but certainly an illness experience. We do recommend that you use the words, the actual words, but then you can make up words. I'm thinking of a parent who had colitis, and their family decided to call her colitis, her illness, Ursula. And so then as a family, they could just say, well, Ursula is really acting up today. Ursula's making it so mom can't go, kind of out in public. Mom needs to stay close to home and close to the restroom. So combining kind of, yes, let's focus on the factual information, but then let's make it our own. Let's create some family unity around what's happening. So let me pause there. Maria mentioned that maybe the form is not working. So I apologize for that. I thought I had tested it, but there may be some issue with our form. So if it's not working for you, what I will do as soon as we end the webinar is I'll double check it and fix whatever might be happening, and I will email it out to all of you. So I just really appreciate you thinking about that and taking a moment to provide feedback if you can. And I apologize for the issue with the form. Any other questions that might have come up? Let me put this, I'm going to put this screen on my contact information. So my email is here, and then you also have information for our helpline. And I just really encourage you to reach back out to Wonders and Worries, to utilize our resources. And I just really want to thank all of you and just tell you how much I honor you and appreciate the privilege to be able to work with your families. And those of you who are professionals who are tuning in, I'm just so thankful for the work that you're doing. So thank you for the opportunity to spend time talking about difficult conversations.